Some of the early information is probably bound to be confusing. We're also getting something from law enforcement that perhaps there were no arrests made at this Westin Hotel in Boston that our viewers are seeing on the screen, but that a room believed to have belonged to at least some of the suspected hijackers has been searched. It's believed, apparently what we're learning now, is that they believe at least some of the hijackers may have been staying at this hotel. I want to bring in Shepard Smith, who is anchoring our coverage from the roof here of the Fox News Channel headquarters. Shepard?
Rita, I was just curious how they might have landed on these particular places. Was talking with a photographer friend this morning in Venice, Florida, who says that they did some searching there, did some arrest warrants over in Volusia County as well, something down in Daytona, now Boston. It sounds as if this thing is pretty widespread.
Yeah, very widespread, Shep, and this is pretty typical for Osama bin Laden. He has tentacles all over the world, and in the United States is typical. When they were planning the Millennium Strikes, and we covered that very, very extensively, he had individuals all over the country. Remember, somebody was coming in through Washington State, but then he had close ties to someone in Chicago, had ties to other people in Florida, and this is sort of typical of the way he controls his network and has individuals all over the country. And we're told that some of the things that may have led is one of the things that we first reported last night about the cell phone calls, that the law enforcement sources were able to intercept 2 particular cell phone calls from bin Laden followers. And in one of them, they were saying basically, hey, thank goodness we were able to hit at least 2 of the targets, sort of congratulating each other. And when they were able to intercept that phone call, they were able to also obviously identify who was basically speaking, who controlled that cell phone call, and where that call was going to. And we're told that one of the calls at least was going to an individual in Florida. And that seemed to be obviously how it led them to Florida. And as we know, they were looking at one of the flight schools down there and a number of other locations. Yeah, but that seemed to be the tie to Florida and how they initially got that, Shep. And then in terms of Boston, also I'm told that something in one of the cell phone calls indicated Boston. I'm not sure if it was one of the callers or something that was said in one of the calls, but something pointed towards Boston.
Okay, Rita, just a question about some of the other people that the FBI may be wanting to talk to. We are getting some word that the FBI is also trying to speak to people like catering staff, maintenance workers, airport security, anybody who might have come into contact with anyone who got on those planes, those 4 planes that were hijacked. What are your sources telling you?
Yeah, we're telling that indeed, because the question right now is, were these individuals who came in from the outside who were simply passengers that were able to get through? And again, remember, FAA standards did allow for blades 4 inches or less, so it is quite possible that they could have just been passengers listed on the manifest, as we understand at least one of them was. But the other question is, this was so sophisticated. How could they be so successful with 4 separate airliners? And the sense is that there may have been some sort of inside movement, some sort of inside job, where possibly people who worked for the airlines may have been complicit and active in this. And that's one of the things that they're looking at. Was it someone who was in the catering service? Was it someone who was in charge of airport security? Was it someone at check-in? There are a lot of different ways that they could facilitate these type of individuals getting through.
Rita, it looks like there's some activity as the camera gets a close-up. There are local cameras closer by. You can see the police there. We're not sure whether they're surrounding a suspect or whether they're just leaving the hotel. Once again, this is in Back Bay, Boston. WBZ providing us with pictures here as police went into a Westin hotel there in search of suspects. Apparently, according to the AP wires, anyway, there have been no arrests. Let's listen into local coverage for a second.
Someone in the back of that or preparing to, but there are still full resources on the scene here. Just at the Westin Hotel in Copley Plaza, EMS still on board, as well as heavily armed local, state, and federal law enforcement agents. You can see some in the special operations uniform in the full black fatigue. You may or may not, because the crowd at this place continues to swell. People standing on the entrance ramp of the Massachusetts Turnpike here at Copley Place to get a better view. At this point, it seems that police priority is what is happening inside and not crowd control at this area. Just want to reassure people, this is not the site of any type of, at least at this point, any type of terrorist activity such as a plane or a bomb or a car bomb. This looks to be like law enforcement coming in to make, first of all, to execute a search warrant and then a possibly arrest. I can still see Boston police. Clearly, that may be the #1 law enforcement agency as far as numbers on the scene, but this crowd and law enforcement numbers continue to swell right at the Westin Hotel in Boston at 1:19 on a Wednesday afternoon. Normally crowded, but this event has maybe doubled or tripled the crowd that would be on here on a late summer afternoon. Normally people enjoying lunch. Now this is a full-fledged operation.
All right, once again, WBZ coverage of unfolding events in Boston. This is the Westin Hotel in Copley Place. Police dressed in full riot gear with ramming batons and other devices, including fiber optic devices, to check underneath doors, went in there looking for suspects that may be related to yesterday's terrorist events. We saw the police come out just moments ago. It looked as though they were surrounding somebody, but we couldn't see clearly, nor could the reporter on site see whether, in fact, they had a suspect in hand. The numbers of people there, the crowd, as you can imagine, as all Americans are furious with events yesterday when they got wind of the fact that something was happening that may involve terrorist suspects. The crowd began to swell, and as you can see, it continues to grow in numbers. But we have a lot of police involved. Apparently, the FBI is there as well. Once again, we see some activity right next to that emergency vehicle there. Let's see if we can spot what it is.
Little piece of information coming in from the Associated Press reporting that it appears that the authorities who went into the Boston hotel that you see on your screen, that they had gotten word that perhaps some of the hijackers that were on board one of those planes that was hijacked, one of the two planes hijacked out of Boston yesterday, may have stayed at this hotel. As you might imagine, in the hours, minutes immediately after those crashes, they began searching the passenger manifest. Then they started trying to match those the names on the manifest with hotel rooms. It appears they matched it to the Westin Copley Hotel in the Back Bay of Boston. Let's go back to WBZ's local coverage.
Push back in order to hook up with our live remote truck so we could bring you this report. There are police filing through now. What may be happening now is that they are dispersing the crowd, or they are wrapping up whatever they have, the operation that they planned out here. Traffic is still flowing, literally bumper to bumper. The Mass Pike entrance has been blocked off by Boston police, but as you can see, people standing on the ramp to the Mass Pike, which is kind of bizarre in effect, only because the speeds of traffic that people were driving by before they cut it off. But now it looks like that crowd, now I see police tape being put up. Clearly that's a crime scene investigation, and those crowds are being pushed back. What is unclear, I can still see people in the windows of the Copley Plaza, the Westin Hotel in Copley Plaza, looking down. That must be a little bizarre to see that. They would probably be a little bit fearful of obviously some of the images that we saw yesterday. But I am here to reassure you there has been no explosions, no terrorist attack at this present moment. But it is amazing how people will stand around and watch something like this on the heels of what we saw happen on the lower end of Manhattan Island yesterday.
Okay. We've got some background information on why this is happening right now in Boston. It relates to an incident actually in Miami, Florida, where a Florida man says FBI agents told him that two men who stayed with him while getting flight training last year were involved in Tuesday's attacks on the World Trade Center. The guy's Charlie Voss. He's a former employee at Huffman Aviation in Venice. He said FBI agents who interviewed him at his home told him that authorities found a car at Boston's Logan Airport registered to the two men.
All right, this Mohammed Atta is one of the names, and it appears 33 years old. He previously had a driver's license in Egypt. They're just trying to piece together pieces of information. Obviously, there's going to be a much wider group of people in Boston connected because obviously it couldn't have been one single person on each hijacked flight out of there. In fact, authorities are saying that according to some of the frantic phone calls they got from the aircraft that were hijacked, the people were telling them there were groups of 3 to 5 hijackers on board. That, of course, would mean that they had other people with them on the ground. That's why they're trying to sort of search every location from Boston to Florida and beyond that might have been connected with any of these individuals, some of whom authorities already know are Osama bin Laden supporters.
All right, we want to go back up to the top of our headquarters here in Midtown Manhattan, where Shepard Smith has been watching events unfold from above. Shepard, what do you got for us?
David, 28 hours later, the building behind me is still burning. And over the past hour since the sun came up this morning, there are reports that there have been no survivors pulled out of that building, despite the feverish rescue efforts of literally hundreds upon hundreds of people, not just from the New York City area, but folks who have been flown in or brought in in some way from around the country. The task is grim, and it will be a long and difficult one, and certainly all are watching as I hear yet another fighter jet flying overhead. One of the most amazing things about the last 24 hours has been the change in the landscape of this city. We are used to this ongoing series of noise, planes landing over at LaGuardia and over here at Newark, and you hear it all the time, and the sirens and the cabs honking and the people screaming and the hustle and bustle. It is gone, and it's dead silence here until a fighter jet flies overhead. Ollie North has been watching all of this as well. Ollie, it certainly feels like a war zone.
Shepard, it certainly does, and just further to that report we just got from Boston, there were reports yesterday, as you know, that many of us got, that there were as many as 50 terrorists deployed to the United States. Well, if indeed there were 4 to 6 on each one of these 4 flights, there is a reason why these flights have not been reactivated in the United States, and that's concerns that some of the flights that had terrorists aboard them yesterday were thwarted by the president's immediate decision to ground all aircraft, and that's why they have not started up again today. Number 2, the entire reason why we've got problems is in large respect because of this airport security problem that we've got. When I boarded my flight yesterday in Detroit en route back to National Airport, Reagan National, we were of course diverted to Dulles. I had in my bag that had passed through security this Leatherman tool that I carry with me for sailing.
Been taking those on planes for years and years.
Indeed they have, and of course that's part of the problem because we now have belief that some of the terrorists used this kind of a device to kill some of the flight attendants aboard and maybe even kill the pilots.
Does that lead you to believe, as John Gibson has been questioning over the past 24 hours, that it's time to go back to armed guards on flights?
Well, you know, Shepard, back in the 1970s, there were a bunch of us Marines who were called in when the Cubans were hijacking aircraft along the eastern seaboard. And the Marines posted the security on those aircraft, lieutenants and warrant officers, until the Federal Aviation Administration trained their air marshals. And of course, we don't have enough air marshals. If you look at what we've got for security in this country, it is now time for Americans to gird up to the fact that it's going to be just like getting on an El Al flight to Israel. Security is going to have to be enhanced dramatically.
For just a moment, we have additional law enforcement activity outside of Boston. You've already seen police officers enter the Westin Hotel there on your screen in the Back Bay, but it appears that police officers have converged on another hotel, the Park Inn at Chestnut Hill in Newton, Massachusetts. That's a suburb of Boston. We have with us once again senior correspondent Rita Cosby, who has been working with her sources on this. Rita, what do you know?
Well, Linda, we were told that they were in the process of trying to serve some search warrants on other locations in addition to the Westin Hotel and in Florida. So this certainly is coinciding with what we were hearing in terms of what you're hearing now in terms of the search possibly at that hotel in Newton, Massachusetts, which is not too far from Boston. Incidentally, it's just a few miles out. The other thing that was interesting, we were talking before about Mohammed Atta. That is the Egyptian who apparently the car that was found at Logan Airport is tied to, and he's someone who lives in Florida. It's interesting because my law enforcement sources are all saying that some of the individuals who are now in custody, and they're saying that these individuals seem to be tied somehow to the hijacking, and they're saying that they have some pretty strong evidence that these individuals have ties to Osama bin Laden. Typically, many of the members of his al-Qaeda network, which is basically his stronghold, his network there in Afghanistan, many of them are Egyptians and Algerians, which is sort of the pattern we saw in the Millennium attacks. And this is interesting because Mohammed Atta, who's one of the individuals they're looking for, is an Egyptian. So it sort of coincides with everything.
Rita, just to interrupt you for a second, I just want to explain to viewers that what you're seeing on your screen there in Boston is the police bomb squad arriving at the Westin Hotel. Unclear why it's been called. Back to you, Rita.
Well, and one of the big concerns I can tell you is that because these individuals, there's been a lot of publicity, and I'm talking to a law enforcement source, they were telling me they were very nervous about serving some of these search warrants, and evidence of seeing the bomb squad now and some of the other things that we were seeing, riot gear and so forth before, is evidence of that. that, because there obviously has been a bit of publicity in the last 12, particularly 15 hours or so, about these suspects tied to Boston, tied to Florida. So many of them may have suspected that maybe their hotel rooms and some of their locations may be searched and maybe booby-trapped them or did some other things, expecting that there would be law enforcement coming in and storming and checking. You know, it's interesting, too, that these individuals are not the type that wanted to be caught. What's interesting, a lot of other terrorist organizations, they send out these signals saying, we want a claim of responsibility. They want the publicity. They want the world to know that they acted. And what's unusual about bin Laden's network and what makes it particularly difficult for law enforcement sources is that they do not claim responsibility. And indeed, the first lead that law enforcement sources tell me that they got was intercepting these 2 cell phone calls that now led them to all these different locations, led them to Boston Logan Airport, led them to a number of locations in South Florida, and now it sounds like a hotel in Newton, Massachusetts, not too far from there. But with the word getting out that they were indeed being looked at, and indeed we started reporting that in the press just hours after the attack, very much they had the heads up, possibly anticipating that law enforcement officials will be going in.
Senior correspondent Rita Cosby. Rita, we'll check back in with you in just a moment.
As events transpire in Boston for the search for the suspects, it looks like they may, in fact, be cornering at least some of them. The questions are larger. If they get these suspects, will Congress follow through with their threats to really create a war on terrorism, even if it's an undeclared one? Our man, Britt Hume, managing editor of our Washington bureau, the man who really created that bureau, joins us now to tell us. Britt, if they find these suspects, will that be enough? Will Congress step back and suddenly go into a more peaceful mode, or will we stay on a war footing?
Well, it's impossible to say right now, David, and a lot of that depends on what the president asks for and what the president does. At a moment like this, a president has even more than usual the opportunity to lead and to take command of a situation and to get the things that he says he wants. It is not clear what the president will do, but he can act unilaterally. If he wanted to carry out strikes, for example, of some kind against a perceived enemy or against a terrorist cell or even against a country, he could do it and make it happen. If it didn't go down well, there might be objections in Congress. So the president has a lot of freedom of movement. I should tell you, David, that we have just heard reports, and we're checking them now, sirens in the streets, emergency vehicles headed toward Union Station, which, as you know, is just up the street from the Capitol, where there have been seen some signs of smoke. So no one yet knows. There's going to be a lot of this kind of thing, and no one yet knows whether this is anything we need to be worried about or not. But obviously, as much on alert as this city is, we're watching for every single sign of possible further trouble that might emerge, and particularly when it comes from a transportation facility, Union Station. Of course, that is the railroad terminal of the Washington, D.C. area. So when there's more on that, we'll try to bring it to you. We're aiming a camera in that direction. It appears now that it may be a truck fire, which could be something quite harmless, but we'll keep you posted.
Indeed.
Britt, been reading on the wires now that it seems at least one of the avenues that investigators are taking is that some of these hijackers may have come across the border of Canada through a checkpoint. They caution that this is still developing information, but it seems to be the avenue down which they're traveling. I remember back around the turn of the millennium, Britt, and they caught this guy who had come into Canada and made his way into the Seattle area. Are there concerns now about the Canadian border?
There are, and as you know, the Canadian border has been closed overnight. So at this point, I think there's concerns from here in Washington, Shep, about all borders and all possible avenues, because obviously what the administration and the government is worried about is whether there will be follow-on attacks. You heard the warning that Jim Angle reported on just a short time ago that's been issued to the airlines that says that the United States government is concerned about the prospect of possible further attacks. And obviously no one knows whether that will occur, whether this was about all that a terrorist group could pull off, astonishing as it was at one time. But that's obviously a concern, and you know that had to be part of the concern of security agents around the president yesterday when the decision was made to keep him in the air aboard Air Force One, and at one point the intention that they had to take him not back to the White House or any such place, but to the North American Air Defense Command in the mountains in Colorado. So we have so you can sense what they're worried about. Possible future attacks are very much on everyone's mind.
All right, we jump in on this conversation. Britt Hume, Shepard Smith, and take you back to Boston. which is truly the hub of activity right now. This is the Westin Hotel in the Back Bay of Boston. It has been learned, this coming from the Associated Press, that it's believed that some of the hijackers on board those 2 flights hijacked out of Boston yesterday were staying at this hotel. The police officers swarmed this hotel a short while ago. They're also apparently searching another hotel in a suburb of Boston known as Newton. Let's go back to WBZ's local coverage.
Evidence that may have been left behind as they stayed here. It's unclear if that's confirmed had they stayed here, but this looks to be one of the central points of this Boston investigation, other than Logan Airport and some of the evidence that was left behind over there. But it appears at this hour, maybe 45 minutes since those police personnel got here, that this is starting to thin out. It's unclear whether they found what they were looking for, but this was a location where heavily armed law enforcement showed up about 45 minutes ago with battering rams and full metal jacket. Another saying is that they had heavy armor going on into those rooms. It's unclear if any arrests were made. I did not see anybody brought out by law enforcement, but there's so many different entrances and exits to this hotel, you wouldn't know if somebody was arrested if they brought them out the other side. But now, which we are left with motorcycle crews, special operation crews, bomb squad crews, but it looks as if the bulk of that law enforcement is starting to pull out, and crowd control also being pushed back into Copley Square. Just a few minutes ago, that whole crowd was pushed up to where you see the ambulances, and it's a bit surreal. I don't know if Michael Bennett can see, but just to the left of those ambulances are an American and Commonwealth of Massachusetts flag that are at half-mast today in memory of those who died and suffered in yesterday's bombings. So just as these flags fly at half-staff around the country, one of the investigations continue to be centered here in Copley Plaza. We should get some confirmation, we hope to this afternoon, that a search warrant was executed here at the Westin Copley Plaza Hotel, but it's unclear if any arrests were made.
All right, we're going to continue stepping into WBZ's local coverage there. It appears that it's quieting down a little bit at the Westin Hotel. There is still conflicting information as to whether anyone was arrested at this scene. Eyewitness reports have said yes. The Associated Press has said no. Senior correspondent Rita Cosby has been talking to her law enforcement sources, trying to get updated information, even as the FBI apparently has now gone to a hotel in Newton, Mass. That's just a short while outside the city of Boston. It's a suburb. Rita, what do you have?
Well, we're told from law enforcement sources that there are a number of suspects and individuals in custody in Boston and Florida. And we're told that, in fact, this hotel in particular, I don't know about the one in Newton, but I can tell you this hotel, that it does believe that one of the hijackers, or one of the people they presume to be one of the hijackers, was staying there. And we're told that possibly several of them were staying there. So they were trying to see if there was any vital information in terms of planning for the attack, any sort of pieces of paper that they may have left behind, any phone calls they may have made from there. There are a number of different things that they could check when going into that hotel, and we're not quite clear if they were able to arrest anyone in this particular hotel. We are told there are several people in custody from locations in Boston and also in Florida. We're also told that those individuals are being questioned as we speak, and that some of them may prove to be material witnesses, not necessarily someone that they will arrest, but someone that could provide helpful information in the case. And we're also told, however, that some may turn into being individuals who may be directly tied to the hijacking. We're told that some of them do appear to have very strong links to Osama bin Laden, that some of them have some loose ties, some of them have some very clear ties, according to a law enforcement source. And we are also told from a senior law enforcement official that they are almost certain that Osama bin Laden was behind this attack, and that typically, as we know from covering him from a long time, that a number of the individuals that he hires are sort of 2 or 3, sometimes 4 or 5 layers away from him, that he often has a number of surrogates carry out the attack, and that's sort of the way he does it. He doesn't want to have it directly sort of come back to him. So he may do several different layers removed, a number of different organizations that he might recruit. And in the case of, say, the USS Cole, where U.S. officials believe privately that he was strongly behind that attack, he's not been indicted in that, but they strongly believe he is behind that attack, it looks like he may have recruited some Yemenis, some local officials, and also possibly some Egyptians there. In this case, they're saying that they believe that his tentacles were quite wide to carry out such a sophisticated attack. And indeed, we do know that one of the individuals that they're looking for, at least in Florida, and we don't believe this individual is in custody, is a man by Mohammed Atta. We also heard Mohammed Akka. We've heard two different spellings. And he is Egyptian and apparently has some ties to Osama bin Laden. And another thing here in Washington, we're hearing some sirens at Union Station, which is not too far. It's literally about a block away from where we are here. We're told a couple different things. We're trying to check it out. One thing, we're hearing that there may be a car on fire, but at this point it's not clear if it's related at all to what's going on.
Rita Cosby in Washington, as we take it back to the New York coverage, just a piece of information. Massachusetts State Police and Boston FBI are now waiting for a search warrant to be executed at the Park Inn in Newton, Massachusetts. We will keep you updated as we get more information. Now to Shepard Smith, monitoring the cleanup operation in New York City. Shepard.
Yeah, this is certainly affecting the lives of Americans from coast to coast, and certainly people from around the world. This just in, baseball has postponed all Thursday games, the third straight day that the whole schedule has been postponed. That's never happened in America. We are now sort of in a city that's changed its complexion over the last day or so. You can get out of New York, but you can't come back in. That's been the case for the past day or so, which leaves the streets feeling like a Christmas morning or a New Year's Day morning, largely empty, largely clean, as if the street folks had come in and swept up all of our mess from a big celebration the night before. This morning on a gorgeous day, a perfect fall day in New York, you walk out of the apartment building and down to the subway, as every day, and stop by the newsstand to get the morning papers, the New York Post, the Daily News, the Times. They had none of those today. They were all gone. Some of them hadn't made it there. Only the USA Today, and picked it up and, talked about war on the front. You can't get around on the streets because there are no cabs, there are no black cabs, there are no yellow cabs, there's none of that. They're using all of those vehicles to get emergency personnel around, and there's no way to travel except by subway. So even if you're one of the probably millions of people who need some privacy right now and needs to figure out if it's your turn to grieve, your only mode of transportation is the subway. And it was a very pointed moment today, getting on the 6 train to head south, and a young woman, probably 30 years old, sitting directly across from me, most of the seats empty. She has the paper in front of her and just breaks down in tears, and another man follows suit, and another man follows suit. And their hugs on the 6 train southbound today as people made their way toward Midtown. This city is deeply affected, rocked to its soul, and looking for some degree of solace. And in a city where we routinely bump into each other in our hustle and bustle to get to the next stop as we move from box to box to box, there's a new atmosphere, David.
Shep, in addition to the sadness, which of course is everywhere, and you mentioned the silence, which is almost it's just unnerving. It's so unusual for a city like New York, the hub of all this attention and excitement. But there's also, I noticed, a sense of true resolve among New Yorkers. And New Yorkers come out with that sense when they're in times of crisis, whether it's a strike or a snowstorm, whatever. And particularly in a terrorist event like this, the likes of which we've never seen, there is, in addition to the sadness, tremendous resolve, perhaps best epitomized by the mayor himself, Rudy Giuliani, who's just been absolutely steadfast in his commitment to stay with this thing and to see New Yorkers land on their feet. So the resolve is there.
All right, as we continue to look into the rescue efforts in New York City, just a new piece of information about Boston. Law enforcement telling the Associated Press that at this Westin Hotel in the Back Bay of Boston, a hotel room is believed to have belonged to at least one of the hijackers, if not more. Officials say that the room was vacant when they got in there, but it did include some information linking it to a name that was on the manifest of one of the hijacked flights that left out of Boston Logan Airport. They have not identified this individual. We take it back to Catherine Herod. She is at St. Vincent's Hospital, the closest facility to the World Trade Center. Catherine.
Linda, the latest information we have is that they've taken on 5 more firefighters at the hospital this morning. They were brought here because of exhaustion. They have been working for over 24 hours. Hospital officials emphasizing to us that they were not pulled from the rubble, but they have learned that the activity in downtown Manhattan is intensifying. Of course, that is good news because they're hoping beyond hope that there will be more survivors here. But that, of course, brings other complications. Taking in heavy equipment, trying to remove the debris to get at those who may be alive and trapped, stirs up the dust. And one of the injuries that they've seen over and over here with the firefighters and with the police officers are abrasions to the eye. Essentially, your eye is moist, and when you have that concrete mercury dust in the air. It sticks to the eye and gets trapped under the eyelid, so that when you naturally blink, you are scratching, you're abrading the eye. It's very painful and, of course, makes it very difficult to see. The latest statistics that we have for you are virtually unchanged in the last few hours. 369 patients have been treated here, 95 have been admitted, 4 sadly have died. Amongst that total, 68 are firefighters and police officers. Today they told us earlier that what they were expecting were what I call the walking wounded, people who were hurt yesterday but were able to get home. Once they got home, they realized that they needed medical attention, so they are seeing some of that here today. They have scores of mental health professionals on hand, because what they're saying is, as families come here searching for information, searching for those who they've had no contact with, it's starting to sink in that perhaps they have died, and they're trying to help them through that grieving process. Overwhelming stories really from all of the medical professionals here. We had one earlier from 2 paramedics who are trying to save lives and in the process nearly lost their own.
I had one patient, we grabbed her, put her in the ambulance. She was full of soot. She was covered from head to toe with ashes, and basically dropped her off to a site and then went back to the command center.
I think if it wasn't for the first patient I took out, Jenny, who we took to Cornell, I would probably not be here right now.
They've had countless volunteers here, 500 doctors, 150 nurses, and what the mayor has emphasized to people is that if they wish to volunteer, there is still a need. Many of these people, they have to consider 2 points now. They are physically exhausted. They have been working for over 24 hours, and they're also mentally and emotionally exhausted from what they've seen. The trauma injuries, the blunt trauma injuries, severe burns, 2nd and 3rd degree burns, and severe lacerations. So these people perhaps are unable to cope, and there will need to be replacements in the days and, of course, weeks ahead. Back to you.
All right. We heard earlier, Catherine Herridge, some very disturbing news that while the facilities exist and while doctors are on hand and everybody's lining up to give blood, there aren't too many victims being brought into hospitals, which leads a lot of people to believe that the death toll will be in the thousands.
He's absolutely right, David. Actually, earlier today I confirmed with a senior hospital official that since midnight they have not taken any casualties from ground zero, from the disaster scene. They have only taken emergency workers, the police officers, and some of the firefighters I mentioned. And what they keep telling us is that they are hopeful and they are determined to help. But of course, with every passing hour, that hope, of course, has to fade. Back to you.
Catherine Herridge. We were talking earlier about some smoke that Britt Hume saw and some other people adjacent to the Union Station. We should mention that our Washington headquarters for Fox News is just a stone's throw from Union Station. That smoke apparently unrelated to any of these incidences. So we are very happy to report that, in fact, what happened at Union Station, there you see a picture of the fountain in front of Union Station. You can't see any signs of smoke. May simply have been unrelated. We've heard reports of a truck fire and other things as well.
All right, we go now to my colleague, Shepard Smith. Back once again on the roof of the Fox News Channel headquarters. Shepard.
Linda, we've been watching over the building down lower Manhattan, probably 70, 80 blocks down there, and certainly those rescue efforts, which Catherine Herridge was describing, are underway. I understand they're moving some of the perimeters, and our senior correspondent, Eric Shawn, is there. Eric, are they kicking you out of there?
Removed to an area a little further north. Basically, one situation is that the wind has changed all day since we've been here since 3 in the morning. The wind had been heading south, taking that plume south and over the Hudson River. Now it is turned around and it is, excuse me, it's been coming up north. So making it a little difficult, plus communications here are difficult with our cell phone service. You talk about the lack of victims, sadly, in the sense that more people will not be able to be treated at the hospital, indicating they could be dead. You wouldn't think that anyone could survive this 2 110-story buildings and the number 7 World Trade Center, but in fact at least 9 people have survived. They were miraculously plucked from in that debris. 4 New York City firefighters, 3 cops, 1 man, one of those police officers, Port Authority officer John McLaughlin, the miracle man of this day here. He, according to the rescuers, rode that building down from the 82nd floor. When he was rescued and pulled out from underneath the debris, he said he was on the 82nd floor when that building imploded, and he rode that building all the way down to what is left of the World Trade Center, just a 5-story hunk of twisted metal and concrete and burnt out, crushed cars. here in the street of New York. We're now with Peter Kirklis, who's helped work with the removal of some of the material. Is it orderly? What are they looking for? Is it focused?
We came to work this morning and we decided what are we going to do today? We're an independent metal shop, and we said, well, why don't we give it a chance and try to go to the Williamsburg Bridge and see if we can go and volunteer. We had no preconceived ideas of what we were going to do when we arrived.
What did you do when you were here?
We were most effective untangling the oxygen and acetylene hoses that seemed like there were a lot of iron workers very focused doing their job, and my team, four co-workers, found that we were most effective untangling the oxygen and acetylene hose.
So you're talking about people doing very specialized jobs, yes, from pulling people out, and iron workers taking care of the iron, maybe other people, yes, breaking apart concrete, and then moving the cranes.
There was crane people and the fire department. I was really impressed with the fire department, and they're all working in unison because they were moving from small pieces, moving up to larger pieces, and then there was a 100-foot crane that was their last objective. We found that we needed to leave because they were at a point where it was getting kind of dangerous, where they were getting to some of the larger structural pieces that I felt we would kind of be in their way.
Well, Peter, that is one element that, because they worked all night, took out about 120 trailer trucks worth of debris going on barges, leaving the area, and they have a lot more to go. They are now moving toward the larger sections, the big cranes, heavy equipment moving in here to try and move some of these big sections to hopefully get to some of the people who they believe are trapped in pockets called voids underneath the World Trade Center, specifically in some of the areas of the shopping arcade and perhaps even the basement. People who were in the basement who were able to survive and are basically still alive, who have been in contact with authorities and family members through the cell phone, and have been able to withstand this thing because of the superstructure of the World Trade Center still enabling them to survive. So for right now, that's where the situation here stands. 2,000 emergency workers busy at work in high gear, hoping that they can get more people, more than just the 9 that have already been saved. We're live in Lower Manhattan at the site. Eric Shawn, Fox News. Back
Eric,
to you.
thanks. Let's hope and pray. He was mentioning this plume of smoke over the past 24 hours. It has drifted east over toward Brooklyn and left a lot of ash there, and left toward North Jersey. But the smoke has never come north toward the rest of Manhattan. So above 14th Street into Midtown, the Upper East and West sides of town, you never even smelled the smoke, never saw it. The soot never came here. But now the wind has certainly shifted, and this reality of South Manhattan or Lower Manhattan is making its way to the rest of New York City. It's hard to miss. Linda Vester, back down to you.
All right, Shepard, thank you very much. A little more information coming in as we take you back to Boston, which seems to be the hub of activity in the FBI investigation. You're looking at the Westin Hotel in Boston. This is where police and FBI swarmed in a little bit earlier today with shields and battering rams, going into, it appears, at least one room that is believed to have belonged to one of the suspects, one of the hijackers. Let's listen to WBZ local coverage.
Of yesterday, but this scene does look like it at least starting to slow down. Still a crime scene, but I think what may come out of here, we understand that one person was brought into custody, and that they executed a search warrant on the 13th and quite possibly the 16th floors of this hotel. What they got out of there may help them in this investigation.
Okay, we are going to continue keeping an eye on Boston because we mentioned a little bit earlier, we've gotten word that apparently law enforcement is also waiting
a day of mourning to show its support and solidarity with the United States. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat expressed their condolences. There were isolated scenes like this in a Palestinian neighborhood. King Abdullah of Jordan said the celebrations were isolated and do not reflect Arab sentiment. He also said Jordan will do what it can to help U.S. authorities in this time of grief. And in St. Peter's Square at the Vatican, Pope John Paul II told his weekly audience, those who believe in God know that evil and death do not have the final say. Robin?
All right, Asya Namdar with an update. Now, coming up on CNN Headline News, we update you on the search for victims and survivors And the search too for the people behind the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history.
Masks, your throats get quickly irritated, you cough, and that's the scenario for everyone who's in this area right now. Almost everyone's wearing masks, but we can tell you that this area of New York City, which is one of the most crowded parts of Manhattan during the business day because it's the financial district, is now off limits to all members of the general public. It's only emergency officials, police, fire, members of the National Guard, and that is a sight that is very hard to get used to, seeing members of the military with their helmets on surrounding the neighborhood. The people who live in the area have been told to evacuate. Some members of the news media have gotten in, like us, to report on what's going on here. You know, the feelings we go through as we cover this are familiar. In 1993, we were here for the first terrorism incident at the World Trade Center, the bombing of the North Tower. In 95, we were in Oklahoma City for the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building, and now in 2001, we're here. But the magnitude of this is so hard to grasp, because if Mayor Rudy Giuliani is right, and there's no reason to doubt it, thousands of people have died outside these World Trade Center buildings, and most of their bodies are still buried under tons of rubble. We all hope for lots of survivors when this first happened. There have been some survivors, but certainly it's not a large number. Right now the count is 9. 6 firefighters, 3 police officials have been located. They are all expected to survive. We hope they find more survivors, but as of now, we've had no one tell us that any more than 9 have been found. Aaron.
Let's walk through a couple of things on that. What officials and rescue teams are hoping for is that there is...
Yes. Given what's been going on.
Yes.
Your take on exactly where this puts us?
Well, if you look back in the past, you see that immediately after a crisis of this nature, you have a sell-off in the markets, which is what you saw in Europe at the end of the day yesterday and in the Asian markets this morning. But as we've already seen, the European markets are bouncing back. A number of them are up today. In fact, a lot of people have compared this with Pearl Harbor. And the interesting thing to note is that the day after Pearl Harbor was attacked, the New York Stock Exchange was up and open and running.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel the market should open that quickly? I mean, we are going to hear from the New York Stock Exchange but at 3 p.m. today Eastern on their intentions to open, and we've heard from SEC Chairman Harvey Pitt that he would like to see the markets open by tomorrow.
Yes, I definitely think that the market should open. The reason is that markets are efficient at processing information. The quicker that the markets open, the quicker that the markets will be able to digest what has happened, incorporate what's happened into the prices of the stocks, and move on.
What about the impact on the individual investor? We've talked about the fact that in previous disastrous situations or national crises that we did have market closures, but we had so many fewer people invested in this market. And now this event, certainly on an emotional level, touches every American, but on a financial level it could as well.
Well, again, my research has shown that the markets quickly bounce back. And if investors are in for the long term, as they should be, the fundamentals haven't really changed that much within the economy, and there's no reason why investors should expect that the market would go down because of what happened in New York yesterday.
I'm just getting new information here, Mr. Taylor, that the FAA has just announced that they want airports to remain closed. There had been speculation that we might see some flights by 3 p.m. Eastern. Of course, yesterday they were talking about trying to get some planes in the air by noon Eastern today. That hasn't happened. For the most part, a lot of this is as a result of new security measures being imposed at the major airports around the country, and many of the airport officials have said that it will take time to implement those new security measures. So as a result, the FAA is just announcing that for the foreseeable future, we will see the airports around the country remain closed.
Mr. Taylor, we'll have to leave it at that. Thanks very much for...
Hugh, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'm there, or I think I'm there.
The president, with so much on his plate this day and so much to do in the days to come, to what president's activities might he look for some degree of guidance? What's worked and what hasn't?
Well, I think you can go all the way back. Of course, we've had Pearl Harbor mentioned, the assassination of John Kennedy, the responses of Lyndon Johnson. I think you go to Ronald Reagan and his responses to terrorism.
Excuse me for the interruption. We have breaking news in Washington. Straight to Britt Hume now. Britt.
Shep, it's worth noting what's happening on the Senate floor right now. The Majority Leader, Senator Daschle, asked that all members take their seats for a roll call vote on the resolution. It is a sense of the Congress resolution that will clear both houses, supporting the president and condemning what has happened. It speaks, before the resolution is over, of support for what is called a war to eradicate terrorism. There had been some debate about whether the word war would be used, but on a bipartisan basis, we understood that there was willingness to do that. This is likely to pass unanimously. It is unusual to see all members sitting in their seats voting. And let's listen to a little of it.
Mr. Corzine, aye. Mr. Craig. Mr. Craig, aye. Mr. Crapo. Mr. Crapo, aye. Mr. Daschle. Mr. Daschle, aye.
Well, there you heard the vote by the Majority Leader himself. The voice you hear is that of the clerk, whose job it is to call the roll. And on a vote of this kind, what you're seeing is the customary repetition after each member casts his or her vote of the nature of that vote for the benefit of people like ourselves who are listening or who may be watching from the gallery. So this is the first legislative response that we've had to this. This is a resolution which was devised in the House and the Senate. This is not something that the president had asked for, obviously, although it expresses support for him. It is, as I said, a sense of the Congress, in this case, a sense of the Senate resolution. It will also pass the House, has also passed the House, that is support for him and the other things that you would expect. It is not possible to gauge from this, Shep, what else Congress might be willing to do, but the sense one has in this town at this point is that whatever additional efforts the president may wish to make, military, relief, rescue, rebuilding, he is very likely to get, and that the money, the $160 billion of surplus Social Security revenues, which for perhaps one of the first times in American history was declared off limits for general spending, will now be on limits.
Britt, you mentioned this word war. I wonder about the significance of that and would be interested to hear your take on it, given that we have a war on drugs that many might argue we don't really seem to be in the business of wanting to win.
Well, in this context, of course, this is a sense of the Congress resolution. It is non-binding. It has none of the effect that a declaration of war would have. The president has not asked for a declaration of war. If he were to do so, of course, at this point, it is unclear against whom and what the declaration would be declared, so it would be made. So that obviously is a legislative and legal question of considerable consequence. But the issue that all of us who are political observers have been watching in this town the last couple of days is to see what kind of tone and language is set. If there appears to be a shrinking from calling this event by words that are the starkest, from using military terminology, that would tip us off.
What the FBI is saying is these people are not under arrest. They are not at this point being described as suspects. Now, much of the investigation, as you may know, has been focusing on Boston. That's where two planes that crashed into the World Trade Center originated. We'll have more on that in just a minute. Yesterday, the FBI seized a white Mitsubishi sedan from the Logan Airport parking garage. Officials say there were suspicious materials in that car. According to the Boston Herald newspaper, the materials included flight training manuals written in Arabic, but the FBI at this point is not confirming that. Also, the Boston Herald quotes anonymous sources who say 5 Arab men, including a trained pilot, have been identified as suspects in the attacks. And Maine's governor confirms 2 suspects flew to Boston from Portland, Maine. He says very little is known about them, except they apparently were using New Jersey driver's licenses. Well, the investigation is also extending southward toward Florida. As mentioned this morning in Venice, Florida, the FBI questioned a man who hosted 2 flight school students more than a year ago. And Charlie Voss says FBI agents told him his former house guests were involved in yesterday's attacks. Now, Voss himself is not a suspect. Also, authorities are delving into possible links between yesterday's attacks and suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden. U.S. officials say they have intercepted 2 phone calls made after the attacks. Those conversations were between members of the Al-Qaeda. That's an organization sponsored by bin Laden, and U.S. officials say the individuals talked about hitting 2 U.S. targets. Also, investigators say their check of passenger manifests is yielding at least 1 person with possible ties to bin Laden. Now, we invite you to stay tuned to CNN Headline News. I can tell you this, that every 15 minutes we're going to pause to give you the very latest, the headlines in what, as you know, is a developing story.
Rescuers in what's left of the World Trade Center, and there's very little left, are finding survivors in the smoldering rubble. Since midnight, rescuers have found 6 firefighters and 3 policemen.
Miami-Dade County through the Kendall area and approaching southwest Broward County. These may be moving into the Miami area as we head through the next several hours. Also, more rain coming in off the Atlantic, particularly between Daytona Beach and the Cape Canaveral area right now. You can see some of that rain starting to pull in just to the northeast of the Orlando area.
Comes to us from Fort Polk, Louisiana. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to make several comments. One comment is that it is evident that our country has come together. I'm a military wife and I'm prior service, and I speak for the people when I say we do not pay our leaders to walk out of peace talks, period. Okay, I also want to make a comment that I read on the internet yesterday about Iraq, saying that America is guilty of humanitarian crimes or crimes against humanity. Every country, including America, has been guilty one time or another for crimes against humanity.
Thanks, caller. From Maureen Dowd this morning in the op-ed page of the New York Times, a photograph of the Twin Towers as they stood in lower Manhattan, and she says, in reference to what happened here in Washington yesterday, that for many hours, the most eerie thing about the American Capitol, under attack for the first time since the British burned the White House in the War of 1812, was the stillness at the center of the city. Next is Horseshoe Bend, Idaho. You're on C-SPAN. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. This is, I would just like to first say my deepest regards.
The ranks of the government about what's the best course of action. And I think for the moment, caution is winning the day here.
Well, Bob Orr, I don't want to belabor this, but would someone at the White House, if not President Bush himself, somebody at the White House, is it procedure to eventually call the Department of Transportation and or the FAA and say, in effect, get your stuff together and tell people what's going on? Because we've had first one thing, then another, then a reversal. Right. We've had all kinds of U-turns in this situation.
Oh, I agree. I mean, clearly the White House can make the call here. I think they're caught up in a situation, Dan, and I'm not making excuses for them because I think there's going to be plenty of time to review their actions here. But I think they're caught up in a situation where we've never had a national ground stop before. This impacts hundreds, thousands of flights, hundreds of thousands of passengers, and it's not quite as simple as throwing the green light and having everything back to normal, because right now there's no real definition of normal. Will the FAA come out at some point this afternoon? I certainly hope they do, because there are a number of questions, and this ambiguity certainly is not helping anybody.
Bob Orr, we have video now of New York Mayor Rudolph Giuliani holding up what he says is one of the flight recorder boxes recovered from the debris around the World Trade Center. If this turns out to be the case, this is a big breakthrough for investigators. And I'm told we have a
for human life. As he did last night, the president seeks to reassure Americans that life would go on, but it is going to be different.
The federal government and all our agencies are conducting business, but it is not business as usual. We are operating on heightened security alert. America is going forward, and as we do so, we must remain keenly aware of the threats to our country. Those in authority should take appropriate precautions to protect our citizens.
Across the nation, it is clear things are far from normal. This morning, air travel still shut down, stock markets closed, sporting events postponed, Broadway shows dark, and U.S. military forces worldwide on high alert. Warships patrolling the waters off Washington and New York, AWACS radar planes patrolling the skies. As rescuers toil, another high-stakes effort is underway to find those responsible for the carnage. NBC's Chris Hansen reports investigators are making swift progress.
Authorities may have identified some of the actual hijackers, and here's how they think they might have done that. Yesterday, they got a phone call from a passenger who had left Logan and arrived at his destination. Of course, he saw on the television monitors what had happened at the World Trade Center. He called investigators to say that he had had an altercation with two men he described as being Arabic in the central parking garage near the American Airlines terminal here at Boston Logan. He described the car that they were near, which was turned out to be a rental car, a Mitsubishi sedan. Investigators arrived at the sedan, took a quick look, and they found inside that there were flight training manuals in Arabic. They were able to connect that sedan to two men who are now identified as brothers, both of whom have passports from the United Arab Emirates, one of whom is a trained pilot. 2 to 3 other suspects may have come across the border into the U.S. from Canada and flown here yesterday morning from Portland, Maine, to take part in the hijackings.
And today in Florida, FBI agents spend hours questioning instructors at a flight school and confiscating potential evidence. Their focus, 2 men described as Middle Eastern who trained at the school last year. By midday, reports that the FBI has connected the two with yesterday's terrorist acts.
All right, that's Stone Phillips bringing us up to date on everything that has happened since the attacks yesterday beginning this morning. Let's go to Florida now, and NBC's Kerry Sanders, who knows some more about those 2 suspects who were trained as pilots in Florida in the fall of last year. Kerry?
Well, on the flight manifest, one of the names that shows up is Mohammed Atta, and that is one of the people who trained at that Venice Flying School on Florida's west coast. I'm here on the east coast in Coral Springs, which isn't too far from Fort Lauderdale, and behind me is an apartment complex where Mohammed Atta lived for a short period of time. The FBI came out here last night. They searched the apartment. There were some more FBI agents who came out again today. They have since left. Now, when Mohammed Atta left this part of Florida and moved over to the west coast in Venice, Florida, on the Gulf Coast, he actually had a roommate whose name was Marwan al-Shahi, and they housed for about a week at a home of a resident over there, and they told the residents there that they were German, that they were not Arabs, that they were in the area learning to fly planes. And I've spoken to the flight certification. Let me get the actual name. It's called a designated pilot examiner. That's a person who the FAA designates to take these people up after they spent time flying to see if indeed they qualify for a commercial rating. He says that he took them up about 3 times each individually, and as they were flying, they went ahead and met all of the certifications, and at that point he went ahead and rubber stamped them, and on they went. He says nothing really stood out about them. It's not unusual in Florida to get people from foreign countries learning to fly to get their commercial ratings because the weather is so good down here and you have flat land, and it appeals to a lot of people to come to this country to learn to fly. They were learning to fly at the Venice Flying School, and I spoke to one of the representatives there at the flying school who went through some of the records that they had. Most of the records were picked up early this morning. The FBI picked up about 8 to 10 boxes of records and have since taken them away. But a few remaining records that they looked through, including date of birth. But the one thing that this administrator there at the school says that she remembers was that these 2 guys sort of hung out together. They didn't really mingle with the other students. And I asked her, did they have a problem paying for these classes? Because, as you may guess, it's not inexpensive to learn to fly, especially to get a commercial rating. She said it was about $25,000 per person to get this rating, to learn to fly a commercial plane. And she said they had no problem paying. They wrote with checks. The checks always cleared. They were always on time with their pay. Getting back to the designated pilot examiner, the one question I wondered was, after they finished learning to fly and actually got their rating, could they then just get into the cockpit of a 757 or a 767? Because all they got their rating on was a twin-engine piston plane, a Seneca. He says you could not get into a 757 and a 767 after getting this rating, take off and land. But you could get into a Boeing 757 or 767, have this training, sit down and fly the plane in the air for a short period of time. So he says, that it would be no problem for these people to have gotten into the seats of the cockpit there and to have flown the plane with the training that they had. Now, at this point, the one thing that we were able to trace is that Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shahi both had this very temporary Florida address, and they have Florida driver's licenses, but they also had addresses in Germany. And we had some producers go by that location in Germany, in Hamburg, and as they arrived, the German police were just arriving, and the German police were taking out boxes of evidence there. So at this point, the authorities are focusing considerably on Florida, here on the East Coast in Coral Springs, as well as the flying school, and they're trying to connect the dots. The last thing I have, which just sort of shows that they have been in the country for some time, was that they enrolled last July into the Venice Flying School, and they really completed their training there in January, even though they had actually gotten their commercial ratings in November and December. They wrapped up in January. So at this point, the FBI is going to be possibly saying something out of Miami a little bit later today, Tom, but there's no confirmation on that yet.
And do we have any idea on how they were in this country? Were they on a tourist visa? Have they applied for a green card? Have they just slipped in here undocumented in some fashion and then hid out?
All very good questions that the FBI is rapidly going through paperwork and trying to resolve, but at this point there's no answer to that.
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Kerry Sanders. A nifty piece of detective work down there in Florida. Two of these men were trained as pilots in Florida last fall, and the man who examined their capabilities said they would be able to, once a Boeing 757 got into the air, take the controls and steer it. And it appears to greatly tragic effect. That's exactly what they did. So that is the latest report that we have from Kerry Sanders. We'll keep you up to date on his investigation in Florida, and an investigation that is going on in Florida, in Boston, and around the world. We also heard the German police are now involved. Let's go to NBC's Andrea Mitchell and see if she has anything additional to add in terms of this investigation. Andrea?
Well, what's so interesting about what Kerry is just reporting is that these men were there last year, last July. This, as the CIA and other intelligence officials have suspected, was not a quick plan. This is something that has been formulated for many months, if not a year. And it's not something precipitated by the most recent violence involving the Israelis and the Palestinians in the Intifada. This is something that is deep-rooted animus against the United States. And there are a certain number of groups, fairly few, who have these feelings and who have the capability of pulling this kind of thing off. That's why Colin Powell and others have been suggesting in our interviews for the last 24 hours that it had to be someone very sophisticated, very well organized, and with a lot of money. That is another reason why they've been looking at bin Laden. You heard that there is a pretty good trail being developed out of Logan Airport, and the two men who stayed in Maine apparently and then switched to a flight from Maine to the doomed flight, the flight that was hijacked, or one or both of the flights that were hijacked out of Boston. And we heard from John Ashcroft, the Attorney General, last night when he was briefing members of Congress, that 3 to 5 hijackers were on each plane. So gradually, actually fairly rapidly, I think, the FBI is putting together a pretty good picture of what might have taken place and of how they were making these connections. The involvement of the German police just tells you how global this concern is. Colin Powell told me this morning that he's been on the phone with leaders around the world. We know that the Pakistanis have sent a military delegation to Afghanistan and that they are being tasked. Our intelligence colleagues in Pakistan are being told that they've got to prove that they've got some influence over Afghanistan to try to ferret out better information about where the U.S. can find Osama bin Laden.
Next 2 days.
Senator, if this is not to be a few cruise missiles and a short-term fix, but a long-term hold and dramatic way.
Yes.
Some of your colleagues are already suggesting that the nation needs to be prepared for the possibility of collateral civilian casualties somewhere else in the world.
Surely.
Talk a little bit about
The president didn't say exactly that, Carl, but the president said that we are going to take action against those that have perpetrated and coordinated these acts, but also harbored those that have taken this action. As we learn more information and we can get clear evidence as to a person or a group of people that may have been involved, if they are being harbored or sheltered in any way, people need to understand that we're not going to let that, hold back our taking actions, even if it could mean collateral damage. And by the way, that was done in the previous administration too. And I'm not hearkening back and being critical, but I was briefed when there was an action taken like this, or at least a couple of them, a few years ago. And I signed on as one of the leaders of the Congress. Yes, we had enough evidence, in my opinion, at that time to justify the strikes that took place. And yes, there was the possibility of collateral damage, but they followed the law and they notified us and informed us, and I thought we should go forward with it.
Senator, do you favor giving the FBI and the CIA more authority in their ability, the tools they use to gather intelligence?
I do support additional authority for our civilian law enforcement entities, the FBI specifically, and for the intelligence community, other law enforcement entities, and defense, if it is needed, to bring those that are guilty to the proper punishment. And I have never felt like the CIA, well, I have not felt like in recent years the CIA had the real authority they needed, some of the freedoms they needed, did not have the authority to take some of the actions they needed, and we should have already changed that. You know, this is not new. This problem has been brewing, and I'm not accusing, blaming, or criticizing anybody, but it has been there. We've had the USS Cole, we've had the Kobar Towers, and now this. We have got to take extraordinary actions. We've got to deal legislatively with whatever the administration needs for the FBI, the CIA, the Defense Department to take care of this worldwide threat. You know, this is not just about America. There are other countries that are threatened with this type of action. We've seen it obviously in the Middle East. There are other countries that understand that they could be next. And I think we've got to, I just spoke to the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, Senator Shelby, and I said, I'd like to know specifically what additional authority you think may be necessary. I would like to talk to the new FBI director and tell him, quite frankly, I think more needs to be done. And if he doesn't have what he needs to do more, tell me what it is they need. And that's not me, that's the Senate. That's the Congress saying, tell us what it is you need, we will assess it. I think you'll find that the Congress is willing to act on behalf of the American people. Because the American people understand clearly that this is not about some remote area in Africa or the Middle East. This is about us, here, now. And we better be prepared to act dramatic. What happened yesterday happen in the future. We have to be prepared to take whatever action is required. I mean, you saw all those buildings in New York City collapsing on innocent men, women, children, firemen, policemen. That's a horrible act. And I don't think this should be an academic discussion. Now, I do say you need to make sure you've considered all the arguments, pro and con, legally of the arguments, and you know, get the diplomatic community to join you in that effort. But we've been having an academic discussion and holding our breath in this area for several years. We can't do that anymore.
Sir,
Thank you.
Senator Schumer said that he would be willing to take a second look at the ban on assassinations by the CIA. When you said appropriate actions or to bring them up, was that what you had in mind?
I'd rather not get that specific.
Trade Center asking reporters to get that message out, what those boxes look like. So there's an apparent determination by authorities to get those boxes not only from the flights in New York, but the one that crashed in Pennsylvania, where authorities are saying that they may learn something very definitive from finding those boxes. Do you feel that these flight data and cockpit voice recorders are that important to this investigation?
I think that they'll be very, very important, because I think they're going to give us an idea of how this was done, and that's going to in turn be very important in terms of what kind of measures are taken by the FAA to beef up civil aviation security. Now, I would say that the chances of finding the recorder in Pennsylvania are probably fairly good. The chances of finding the recorders in the World Trade Center and the voice recorders are the ones that are really going to be important here. Are probably not terrific, and the chances of finding the recorder in the Pentagon are probably somewhere in between.
We've been hearing ever since the first moments of this horrendous attack about how American life will change forever as a result of this attack. We're talking primarily, and you mentioned it, airline security. How do you protect against terrorists who apparently, in this case, all they needed were airline tickets and some knowledge of the cockpit and flying?
Well, I think that the challenge for us here is going to be to figure out how we deal with hijackers who are willing to sacrifice their own lives. This, particularly in the United States, has not been something that we've dealt with before or considered to be a major threat. So the fact that these folks are suicidal makes it very, very much more difficult to deal with how you're going to resolve this.
Do you think we need sky marshals domestically like there are on international flights?
I think that certainly is one of the things that's important, and I think that you know, you're talking about knives. If there are people on these aircraft that are trained killers, they can deal with people sometimes without having to have a knife. You know, people that are trained to do this are going to be able to take over from airplane pilots and people on airplanes. So I don't think that the weapon and the screening is the biggest issue here. It's how to deal with the suicidal aspect of this.
Bob Francis, former Vice Chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board, illustrating quite effectively the future problems faced in America at protecting against this type of tragedy from happening again. Natalie?
Louis Leshy was on the 86th floor of the first tower when it was hit, and he joins us now on the phone. Mr. Leshy, tell us about what happened, what did you think happened, and how close were you to the impact?
I was on the 86th floor, and I was reviewing some work, and it was about 10 to 9, and the building shook. And I felt it was an earthquake, and it didn't bother me because I felt the building could sustain earthquakes. They were built for that. And then there was a huge explosion, and the ceiling fell. And I got out of that conference room, and there were 5 other people on the floor, and we decided to leave, but when we opened the door, there was a black wall of smoke. So we closed that door right away, and we sat in the conference room and debated what to do, and then we decided to break the windows. And one of the gentlemen found a ball-peen hammer, and then we said, well, if we break the window, what's going to be effective? We're going to be sucked out? Is the smoke going to be sucked out? Or is air going to come in? So we had no alternative. So we broke the windows, and at that point, glass flew in as well as hot shrapnel. We didn't know where that came from. And the smoke began to subside because it had begun to fill the office. And finally, about 20 minutes later, someone came up and said, we're going down. And we started to walk down. There was gray smoke. Could only see the shadow of flashlights. And between the screaming of the sirens, which is very eerie, and water coming out of the walls and the ceiling, much like a shower, and about 2 inches or 3 inches of water cascading down the steps, we started to make our way. And about 5 minutes or 6 minutes into the descending, there was the lights went out.
Could you feel as you descended heat coming down on you?
No heat.
No heat.
Just water, and that's all it was. And we would be going down. The lights came on. We'd go down maybe 5 or 6 stories, and then it'd be absolutely dry. And we'd go down some more, and then there was a shift from stairway A to B as things got congested. There were people passing, with bruises and bleeding, and some people being carried down. But what was marvelous is we were on the right side, and here were firemen carrying maybe 30, 40 pounds of load going upstairs where we were trying to escaping. They were going into it.
Did you have any idea as you were trying to make your way out of the building what had happened? Were people starting to talk about what it could have been?
Nobody knew what happened. Nothing. People were comforting one another. Someone said to me, you look kind of tired, buddy. Let me hold your jacket. And he did. Someone else asked to hold my briefcase. We made it all the way down. I don't know where those people are. And we were in the mall, on the mall level. And there were about 30 people with me. And we were walking down, and they said, okay, go left. And as I went left into this passageway, which is, sort of right by the PATH trains, I heard a huge in back of me, and I turned around, and it was collapsing. The building was collapsing, and the next thing was this huge rush of wind pushing me, and I fell down immediately and hugged the ground, and debris went over my head and just buried me. And all those people I was with, I heard nothing. I kept voice contact, hello, 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 nothing. Finally, a pin of light showed, and after about 10 minutes, that pin got bigger and bigger. Gentleman picked me up, and we walked out. He said, there's right or left. Let's go left. We went up into light, kept walking along. Some other people were with me. Then we went down an escalator that wasn't moving. Then there was maybe 7 people with me. As we went down, we were told to go up because probably we had an underground passage to an obstacle that was at the top. As I went up, now there was only 5 people with me. One guy went his own way. The policeman went to get him, and he disappeared. Now there was only 4. We went to another area, and then there was another policeman came. He went to an emergency and said, stay here. One guy left. Then there was only 2 of us. And one guy said, I'm going to go through that door. It wasn't a door. It was really broken glass. And he went, and I went about 20 feet behind him, and he disappeared. And that was the eerie thing. Of all those people I was with, they disappeared. When I stepped out into the plaza, there was nobody. It was like the last man on earth, except for about 4 inches of white soot, looked like snow. It was really ash, I guess. And I walked through it, and I saw nobody until I had reached, I guess 100 yards from the building, and things were falling down, and there were pockets of fire all around. And it wasn't until I reached about that 100 yards that I began to see another human. And I walked up to Nassau Street and started to make a call to my wife, and just then there was another, and another part of the building collapsed, and this black roar came back again and turned the day absolutely black. So I had turned the corner, threw myself on the ground, and waited a second time for the blackness to stop. And finally, again, there was a little pin of light, somebody's voice asking me to stand up, and I stood up in the dark and imagining, okay, this is Nassau Street. Now there's going to be a cross. You're going to go down a curb, go up. I saw the light get larger and larger. He came and got me, and we went into a store. And there were 5 or 6 people there. One guy gave me his T-shirt. I looked like somebody had poured black plaster of Paris all over me. I couldn't swallow, spit out black. And then I was told to walk up to Beekman Hospital. But as I started walking up, I got as far as federal court house, and the police captain said, you can't go up there. They put me in front of a hydrant, poured water all over me, took me up to a triage center. Police up there washed me.
Mr. Leshy,
Yes.
Mr. Leshy, we have to interrupt your chilling account, and we thank you so much, but we have to go to the Secretary of State now. Colin Powell's beginning a news briefing.
Several hours since I spoke to the press this morning. Let me begin once again by saying that our hearts go out to all the victims and to their families. It is a tragedy, but as the President has made clear, it is a tragedy that we are strong enough to overcome. Our spirits will not be broken. The resilience of this society will not be broken. We will find out who is responsible for this, and they will pay for it. We are undertaking a full court press diplomatically, politically, militarily, and in the course of the morning and early afternoon, I have been in touch with a number of foreign leaders and international organizational leaders to coordinate the diplomatic approach to this. I have talked to Kofi Annan, Secretary General of the United Nations, and I thank the United Nations for the Security Council resolution they passed, and also for the statement from the General Assembly, and I expect the General Assembly to also work on a resolution later today. Lord Robertson in NATO is hard at work with resolution that is under consideration now that would tee up, if I can put it that way, prime Article 5 responsibilities. Article 5 of the Charter says that an attack from abroad by any one against any member of the alliance is an attack against the alliance. If that resolution goes forward, that doesn't invoke Article 5 yet, but it puts in a position to be invoked when the United States makes a judgment about the nature of the attack and where that attack came from. And I appreciate what Lord Robertson and his colleagues are doing for us. I've also been in touch with Foreign Minister of Belgium, Louis Michel, who is also head of the presidency of the EU at this time, and High Representative Javier Solana, to thank them for the strong support we have received from the European Union and the statements they have made and their cooperation promised to us to deal with this tragedy and to move forward. I've also attended, along, of course, with my other colleagues, a National Security Council meeting with the President where we reviewed all that has happened and began to make our plans for the efforts we will be taking in the future, not only to bring these perpetrators to not only justice but to the punishment they deserve, but at the same time to undertake a worldwide effort to build a coalition against all forms of terrorism, wherever it may occur and however it rears its ugly head. This will be a major priority of the administration, and I can assure you it will therefore be a major priority of the State Department. I have also, in the course of the day, spoken to the Foreign Minister of Great Britain, Germany, Canada. I have spoken to Foreign Minister Perez twice, Prime Minister Sharon, Chairman Arafat, and Foreign Minister Manley of Canada, if I didn't mention that, Foreign Minister Ivanov of Russia, Foreign Minister Ruggiero of Italy, and I have another number of other calls that are in the process of being made so that we can bring all of this together. And I must say I am deeply touched by the expressions of support I have received from my colleagues. And as I think you all know, the President has been very busy, and I'm sure the White House has announced his 2 phone calls to President Putin as well as to Mr. Chirac, Jiang Zemin, President Jiang Zemin, Prime Minister Blair, Chancellor Schroeder, and Prime Minister Chrétien. So he's spoken to all 5 members, other 4 members of the Security Council, permanent members of the Security Council, and I will leave it to my other cabinet colleagues to talk about the issues under their purview over at Defense, Justice, and FBI. There are, of course, lots of reports and rumors out there, and I think it is wise for all of us to take many of these reports and rumors into some context and perspective. This is also a time, of course, in that regard, for the American people to try in this time of tragedy to restore the society to a sense of normalcy. We've got to get back to our jobs, we've got to get back to work, and I know that Secretary Mineta, as soon as it is possible and as soon as it makes sense and is safe, will restore the air traffic system, and commercial air traffic will be brought back online, and I will wait for him to make those announcements with respect to that, and I know that's very much on your mind. Once again, we're building a strong coalition to go after these perpetrators, but more broadly, to go after terrorism wherever we find it in the world. It's a scourge not only against the United States, but against civilization, and it must be brought to an end. I will be delighted to take a few questions.
Secretary, the State Department has been advocating restraint in response to terrorism with the argument that violence only provokes more violence. It's an endless cycle. I wondered if the U.S. will be guided by its own admonition now that the U.S. has been horribly attacked by terrorists.
I think when you are attacked by a terrorist and you know who the terrorist is and you can fingerprint back to the cause of the terror, you should respond.
But
Andrew?
I mean, should it be a limited response or?
You should respond, whether it's limited or other than limited. You should respond to those who did it, and if you're able to stop terrorist attacks, you should stop terrorist attacks. Andrew?
Secretary Powell, one country you didn't mention was Pakistan, and I understand that your deputy has spoken with the ambassador to Pakistan, and that this evening the U.S. ambassador to Pakistan will be meeting with General Musharraf. What specific steps are you asking Pakistan to take, and have you at all insinuated that if all signs do lead to bin Laden, that the U.S. would take military action against Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Our ambassador is going to be seeing going to be having that meeting that you made reference to. It'll probably not be this evening, more likely tomorrow as a result of schedule problems. But Ambassador Armitage, Deputy Secretary Armitage, did meet with Pakistani officials today, and really to share views. We have not made a determination yet as to who is responsible for yesterday's attack. But we thought, as we gather information and as we look at possible sources of the attack, it would be useful to point out to the Pakistani leadership at every level that we are looking for and expecting their fullest cooperation and their help and support as we conduct this investigation and as we generate more information, and to see if they can be helpful in generating information, as well as how helpful they might be if we find a basis to act upon that information. So yes, we are doing what you described with the Pakistanis. Robert?
Just to clarify, when you say you're building a strong coalition to go after the perpetrators, does this mean that you are expecting or hoping that other countries will participate in some kind of military retaliation?
Under Article 5, if we go that far and it actually is executed, then there is an obligation on the part of our NATO allies to assist if we go in this direction. It doesn't mean that they necessarily will participate in the attack, but it makes it easier to obtain support in the way of overflight rights and things of that nature. So but I don't want to get into what we might or might not do and who might go with us and who might not go with us, because that's just too speculative at the moment.
Might follow that. Having been through the Gulf War as you were, would you hope to build a kind of coalition that extends perhaps beyond NATO and includes perhaps Muslim nations from different parts of the world?
It should include Muslim nations. Muslim nations have just as much to fear from terrorism that strikes at innocent civilians. And I do have a number of calls, and I just haven't connected yet with other leaders in the world representing Muslim populations. As I was coming down, I was waiting to receive a call from Amma Musa, head of the Arab League, and I'll also be talking to my Egyptian colleagues and Jordanian colleagues before the evening is out. Yes, sir.
You have not yet mentioned the point that President Bush made last night, the idea of holding other countries responsible.
Yeah.
This seems to be a dramatic escalation in the U.S. view on how it responds to terrorism. Is that a correct interpretation of it? And as a follow-up, you talk about returning to normal, yet there have been all these mentions of acts of war, the idea that the country is in a war. How can we just return to normal when in a situation like this?
Well, on your first point, I mentioned in my earlier statements, and I will mention it again, that it's not just a matter of going after the perpetrators, but it's going after and dealing with the sources of support that they have, whether that source of support might come from a host country or other organizations that provide them. We have to make sure that we go after terrorism and get it by its branch and root. And so we will hold accountable those countries that provide support, that give host nation, if you can call it that, support and facilities to these kinds of terrorist groups. Now, yes, we believe that acts of war have been committed against the American people, and we will respond accordingly. But at the same time, life has to go on. In all of the difficult times we will be facing ahead, we have to still try to return life to a sense of normalcy. We cannot be a people who are afraid to live. We cannot be a people who will move away from a relatively open society. We cannot be a people who walk around terrified. We're Americans. We don't walk around terrified. We're going to be strong in this difficult period, and we're going to move forward with pride and with determination, and we will get our society back to normal with whatever additional precautions nevertheless might be necessary to secure our society without locking ourselves down. Yes, sir.
Secretary Powell, yesterday Senator Graham said that in response to the attacks he would be willing to reassess the ban on assassinations of foreign leaders. And I was wondering, would you support such a reassessment?
The ban is an executive order, and we have not made such a reassessment, and I'll just leave it there. Jane?
India has said many times in the past that Pakistan is harboring terrorism, and there are training camps in Pakistan, and now U.S. officials, including a number of lawmakers here on the Hill, are saying that Osman bin Laden have his training camps in Pakistan, and because he's sending all his, running his empire or terrorism empire from Pakistan. So now Is it time not to go after those countries who are harboring terrorism really? Because how long can we wait, or how many innocent people can we kill?
Well, I don't want to confirm what the Indian government may or may not have said. But as the President said last night, we will be directing our efforts not only against terrorists, but against those who do harbor and do provide haven and do provide support for terrorism. Jane?
Deputy Secretary Armitage heads a task force with the Russians on Afghanistan, where the United States and Russia seem to share some interest. Can this be used as a platform in the coming days? Or do you have
Yes,
decisions?
we're planning to do that.
In what way?
As you know, it's a little difficult to travel right now, but we're looking at ways that he and Deputy Foreign Minister Trubnikov can pursue this.
With a country like Afghanistan, with whom we don't have diplomatic relations, there's less leverage that we have against that country. What kind of things are you thinking of using now when you talk about going after the entire country? Is it food aid? How else?
We haven't singled out any country to go after. What we're trying to do now is gather the evidence and the information so that we can make a judgment as to who is responsible for this act. And once we do that, we will go after that group, and we will determine what kinds of support they've been getting from what host countries or other supporting agencies, and we will go and deal with them as well.
Mr. Secretary, there are some 25 organizations on the list of FTOs, the State Department's list. Should all those organizations consider themselves targets of this global campaign against terrorism? And secondly, when you speak to the Arab leaders, and will you be asking for specific acts of support, of material assistance in this campaign?
On the first question, just the very designation that they have been put on that list of foreign terrorist organizations suggests that the United States will be taking action against them, and we just identified another one this week, the AUC in Colombia, and we take certain actions against them. It doesn't mean we go in and attack them with military force, but there are a variety of political and diplomatic and other and legal actions that you can take against them. With respect to conversations with Arab leaders, I'm sure I will discuss with them a full range of possibilities as to what kind of support they can give us of a political and diplomatic nature. I don't know of any other kind of support that I would ask for at this time. I might mention that in the context of my discussions this morning with Shimon Peres and Chairman Arafat, and also Prime Minister Sharon, I encouraged all sides to do everything they can to get this process of meetings started that we have all been waiting for Mr. Arafat and Mr. Peres to find an opportunity in the very near future to meet and not have protracted discussions about where to meet. It's more important to meet. So in this time of tragedy, in this time of heightened tension throughout the world and especially throughout that region, let's seize this opportunity to see if we can not start this process of meetings, this schedule of meetings, so that we can get to the Mitchell Peace Plan. So even while we are dealing with this situation, this crisis that is here in Washington and New York, we are also working on the Middle East situation and seeing if we can get that jump started. Yes.
Secretary of State Colin Powell assuring Americans that this is a tragedy we are strong enough to overcome. He gave no specifics because there isn't anything specific yet to provide, since the FBI is still trying to hunt down leads. And as we mentioned, they have brought in some people in Boston and South Florida to question. They're not being called suspects, but Colin Powell reassuring the country that the country should respond to this terrorist act, whether it's limited or not. He also said we need to go after terrorism at its branch and root. We will go after countries that provide support to terrorists. We should hear more about where the investigation stands, whether the United States is getting close to knowing who backed this, if this was a state-sponsored act yesterday, from the FBI, which is holding a news conference in about 10 minutes. And of course, we will provide live coverage of that. Lou?
And Natalie, we have some indications now of why the effort by authorities, including a SWAT team at the Westin Copley Hotel in Boston, may have wound up inconclusively. We have indications out of Rhode Island that authorities have stopped an Amtrak train near Providence. Broadcast reports are telling us there may be a suspect or suspects on board who eluded authorities in that Boston part of the investigation. The streets near the train station now, we're told, have been cordoned off. The terminal was evacuated about 2 p.m. That's less than an hour ago. It's not immediately known where the train was headed, and there's no official confirmation on why the train was stopped, but we are getting a hint there of why the SWAT team operation at the Westin Copley Hotel less than a couple of hours ago ended up inconclusively. They may have been looking for someone there who eluded them. Perhaps now we know more about the investigation, which seems to be proceeding rapidly because of a number of clues. And we have Susan Candiotti down in Florida, where some people have been taken into custody, not as suspects necessarily, but Susan, maybe you can tell us exactly what's happening down there.
Good afternoon, Lou. Let me fill you in. We do know this, that the FBI is concentrating certainly a key part of its investigation in at least 4 different areas of Florida. They are Vero Beach, Florida, where we are reporting to you from, Venice, Florida, on Florida's west coast, several locations in Broward County, Florida, to the south, as well as Daytona Beach, Florida. Now, reporting to you, giving you a live look at what's happening now on a very quiet residential street in Vero Beach, Florida, we can tell you that about 2.5 hours ago, the FBI took in for questioning a man identified by a law enforcement source as an acquaintance of a man who rented one of 2 homes located side by side, homes that have been searched here on this street by the FBI since about 5:30 this morning. We counted at one point at least a dozen FBI agents here. We also saw someone here from the ATF and someone dressed in protective garments. Again, these 2 homes are located side by side. They were being rented, according to neighbors, by 2 men who identified themselves as being commercial pilots from Saudi Arabia. One neighbor tells us that one of the men was believed to be attending a school called Piper Flight Training School, one once attended by JFK Jr. Also, a neighbor tells us that one of the 2 homes was being rented by a family, a man, a woman, and at least 3 children who moved out over the weekend. The man who rented the house to them tells me that they always paid their rent on time. He never had any trouble with these people, and he feels very badly about the whole thing. We do know that at least one man was still living at one of the homes located next door. The FBI showed up at 5:30 this morning, pounding on doors, telling people they had to evacuate because of a possible bomb. Apparently none was found. Here's what one of the neighbors had to say about the neighbor next door.
My son knew that played with their kids down the road, but I never met the parents. They were, stayed inside pretty much. Or I waved to them. I mean, they were very friendly. They waved, every time they passed by or whatnot.
So this is a couple?
It was a family, yes.
Family with how many children?
4, I believe.
Lou, we've run out of time, but when you come back to us, we will tell you about additional information of searches going on in other parts of Florida. Back to you.
All right, Susan Candiotti in Vero Beach. And now back to Aaron Brown in New York.
Lou, thank you. The rescue operation continues at an agonizingly slow pace. Firefighters, police officers involved, volunteers, Red Cross workers. Among the Red Cross workers involved in this painful operation, Jonathan Shanor, and I hope I pronounced that right, and Joe McKinnon, in an effort to get a look inside the ground zero zone. We gave them a camera, and they joined us here to talk a bit about what they saw. I want to show your pictures in a minute, guys, but first, just give me a sense of the kind of work you've been doing. Joe?
Just basically going through buildings, sifting through debris, going on the second floors, just checking, looking through debris, holes, anything that could possibly have a body or something. And basically just giving a hand down there. A lot of firemen and the EMTs are exhausted. They wanted to relieve them and give them a helping hand.
I want to, if we can, guys, roll the tape. And I know it's a little tricky for you guys to see it up on the roof there, but just describe as we go along what it is you were shooting, what it is we are looking at. John, go ahead.
There's no picture.
Just tell us what you were doing and where you were. Jonathan?
I don't actually know the names of the different buildings. We got in there and, like Joe said, we searched the basement floor first, moved up to the first and second floor of the Twin Towers building, and then we moved on to the other buildings and searched them too for any survivors.
When did you shoot the pictures? This morning?
Sometime around 9 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock this afternoon or this morning.
And these firefighters that we see walking away, the firefighters, the rescue people you saw, did they look to be exhausted? Did they seem okay?
It seemed like they were exhausted. There was a lot of fresh people coming in, people you could tell were fresh because they had clean clothes on. There's a lot of people down there to help, which is much appreciated by everyone, I'm sure.
And when you talk about there were a lot of people there to help, tell us what it is they were helping with, in a sense. Were they putting out fires? Were they trying to find people? What exactly were they doing?
They're doing everything. They're putting out fires, they're sorting through debris, they're moving mass quantities of debris. They have a almost like a chain set up of guys just moving debris piece by piece, trying to find bodies or survivors.
Was it noisy? Was it quiet?
There's a lot of noise down there. There's a lot of machinery running, compressors.
Did it have a noticeable smell? Was there a smell in the air you could identify?
Yeah, there's a bad smell in the air. I don't know if it's the asbestos or what it is exactly, but there is a bad smell.
And just continue telling us what we're looking at as we go along here. We've got a couple more minutes of the tape, and it helps our viewers if you give them some sense of what they're looking at now.
I believe that's a picture right now between the two tower buildings. Like I said, I'm not familiar with the exact buildings and what they were called, but that's what it appears to be to me. That's several of the firefighters and rescue personnel moving the debris down there.
And again, this was about 9 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, yes.
And just let me get some help from the control room here. I want to go to, guys, I want you to stay where you are, okay? Just stay where you are. I want to go to John King now in Washington, our senior White House correspondent. John has found out an extraordinary piece of information, and he joins us now. John, tell us what you got.
Aaron, some new information that somewhat conflicts, or at least isn't exactly consistent with information we were reporting yesterday. But let me tell you now what the White House is saying on the record now. The White House saying publicly that one of the reasons the president did not come directly back to Washington from Florida yesterday was that it had, quote, reasonable and credible information that the White House and Air Force One were targets of the terrorists. Now, one thing the White House is saying is that that plane that struck the Pentagon may have, emphasis on may have, initially been planning to hit the White House, but instead at the last minute decided to veer course and hit the Pentagon. All this comes because of some criticism, including from Republicans in Washington, that it took too long for President Bush to get back to Washington. Remember, throughout the day yesterday, we were reporting there was an emphasis on the important political statement of getting the president back to Washington. Well, the White House spokesman, Ari Fleischer, going on the record and saying one of the reasons the president did not come directly back was because not only was the White House considered a target, but Air Force One as well. I say this is somewhat contradictory to information we reported yesterday, because throughout the day I was in conversations with Secret Service officials and others who said that they never believed that Air Force One was at risk at all. They said one reason the president did not come directly back was as a precaution that early on, remember, the president started in Sarasota, Florida. Then he went to Barksdale, Louisiana, Barksdale Air Force Base. Then he went to a military installation in Nebraska. When the president was in Louisiana at that time, the Federal Aviation Administration could not guarantee that there were no longer any airplanes in the sky. Obviously, 4 planes had been hijacked. There was a concern that Air Force One should not be flying into potentially dangerous airspace. But when the president did return under heavy fighter escort from Nebraska, at that time, everyone had said there were no longer any planes, any unauthorized planes, any commercial air traffic over the United States. But again, today, the White House just recently saying on the record, one of the reasons the president did not come back right away was because Air Force One was considered to be a potential target. And they're also saying that that plane that hit the Pentagon may have initially been aiming for the White House. Now, remember the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. We also know that senior administration officials are telling members of Congress that they believe that plane also was turning south toward Washington for 3 potential targets. One, perhaps the presidential retreat at Camp David, Maryland. One, also the White House or the United States Capitol as well. So as the investigation continues, Aaron, obviously some new information coming out. This time, the White House extraordinarily going on the record to rebut criticism from some members of Congress, including Republicans, that the president should have gotten back to Washington sooner.
John, let me ask a couple things. The first of them, maybe one of those questions that is obvious to everyone but me. How did they give you any indication of how they think these terrorists were planning to take Air Force One out? Any idea at all?
That is the question we cannot get answered. Obviously, we saw extraordinary pictures yesterday. Air Force One, the president's 747 in this case, traveling with fighter jets visible to those inside the plane. Now, we know when we travel with the president, he is often escorted by fighter jets. Never do we see them that close. Occasionally, you will see one of them pass by when you're on these trips. This obviously was an obvious effort by the military to demonstrate that Air Force One was safe, but they're not saying how Air Force One could have been a target, whether they believe these hijackers were going to go to the extraordinary lengths of trying to ram a flying 747, and it is an extraordinary plane. It is not your average 747 with a commercial air travel. They're not saying that. All they're saying right now is they had, again, quote, reasonable and credible information to believe that both the White House and Air Force One, the president's jet, may have been targets.
And those pilots who fly Air Force One are not run-of-the-mill commercial airline pilots. I mean, no disrespect, but these are Air Force pilots who have a great deal of training in avoiding all manner of dangers to the president, to themselves, to that airplane.
They have a great deal of training. That plane is also equipped with some extraordinary devices, some of which we will not discuss publicly, but it has devices on board that are meant to help it in the case it is attacked, as any military airplane would be. This is the president's plane, but it is a military aircraft. And it also travels, you see here, looking out, you see the wing of Air Force One here. If you look out, you see that fighter jet right off the wing. Again, that is an extraordinary sight. For those of us who travel on Air Force One on occasion, every now and then you will see a fighter jet in proximity, or you will land or leave a military base having just seen fighter jets take off to be part of the president's escort, especially on international trips. This extraordinary, the president flying with a fighter escort just off the wing. Again, given the events of yesterday, 4 commercial planes hijacked, rammed into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon as well. No surprise that they would take such extraordinary security measures around the President of the United States, but the White House now saying one of the reasons for that was that they believed Air Force One was a potential target. But again, I want to say at the time of those pictures taken when the President was flying back from Nebraska to Washington, D.C. At that time, we had been told by government officials at the Transportation Department, at the White House, and elsewhere that the government was certain there were no longer any planes in the skies over the United States that were not authorized to be there.
John, just quickly one more thing. And again, one of the things that strikes me about this is that they're saying it at all, and that's the truth. Whether it was a target, not a target, this close to the event itself, I'm a bit surprised that they would discuss it. This, you believe, is simply to respond to the criticism that some have offered up.
That's right, Aaron. Remember, this is a president who this morning in the cabinet room, surrounded by his national security team, said he too considered this an act of war, and that the people of the United States and the government of the United States needed to dedicate financial resources, moral resources, if you will, and perhaps military resources down the road to responding to it. This, a major test for a first-year president, 8 months in office now, the White House bristling at the suggestion that the president did not come back to Washington as soon as possible, taking the extraordinary step today. One of the things we have heard throughout the past 24 hours is that the administration does not want to discuss the details of the investigation, does not want to give away certain clues, because that could tip off those responsible for this and perhaps help them elude the authorities. But the White House going on the record in this case saying that one of the reasons the president did not come straight back to Washington was, again, because both the White House, and remember the White House was evacuated just after that plane hit the Pentagon yesterday morning, and Air Force One, the White House saying, again, reasonable and credible information that they were targets.
John, our senior White House correspondent, John King, I know you well enough to know that you want to get back to the phones and work the story. I'll let you go, and we'll hear from you as the day and night continues. Back up the street a bit, about 30 blocks or so, to Jonathan Chenor and Joe McKinnon, who are the two Red Cross volunteers who we gave earlier today, this morning, a small handheld camera that they could take in as they went looking, helping the firefighters, the police officers, all the others in and around Ground Zero at the World Trade Center, and they are helping us as we go with what they saw and what they did and what it was like. Just orient me again, if you can, either one of you. Tell me what we're looking at there. Can you tell?
I believe that's the building that's right above the Burger King. I don't, again, know which building it is. It's if you're looking straight at the World Trade Center, it would be off to the left.
Okay. And was it, obviously there was an enormous amount of smoke pouring out. Was there fire as well? Were you aware of fire?
The fire was farther back from where we were. There was some small isolated fires inside the buildings we were in. Just minor stuff, places the firemen had already been at.
And guys, did you feel safe?
No.
You did not?
Not at all.
What did you feel the dangers were there?
Those buildings can collapse at any time.
And when you say these buildings, how many buildings were you warily looking at?
5 or 6, I believe.
And what made you think they could collapse at any time? Just simply the fact that others had?
Well, we looked up and there's metal hanging off the roof, pieces falling all around us all day long and all night long that we were working. It was quite scary.
And was this, guys, was this the first time this morning that you had been into the area, or had you been working in and around the area last night and yesterday afternoon?
Yes, we got here at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we've been working ever since.
And where did you come from, by the way?
Rhode Island.
You came from Rhode Island. And again, Joe and Jonathan are Red Cross volunteers who came in, and we gave them a small camera to videotape some of what they saw. Those are the pictures. These are the pictures that you are looking at now. Was there a sense from fire officials, were they directing you to stay away from one area, move to another? What kind of direction were you getting?
There was no real direction. Everything's pretty chaotic down there. There's no one really telling anyone what to do, at least at the point we were down there. We were allowed to go where we wanted. We searched the buildings with no problems. No one told us to leave.
I'm going to ask you to do one of the things that I think is awfully hard. Give me a sense, just your best guess of how many people were in that area where you were. Are we talking hundreds of people? These are rescue workers, firefighters, police officers, and the rest?
Several thousand.
Several thousand people.
By the time we left, several thousand people were there helping.
And when you got there at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I realized the last thing you were doing when you arrived at 2 o'clock in the morning was counting the number of people around you. But were there a lot, a few, hundreds?
There was quite a number.
And what was their state at the time? Did they look exhausted?
I really wasn't looking. I got to New York and I just started helping. Started searching.
And either one or both, actually, when you first arrived on the scene at 2 o'clock this morning, what did you think? What went through your mind?
Any comment, Joe?
I'm sorry, say it again for me.
I was amazed at what I saw. It's incredible that people can do this to each other.
Gentlemen, thank you both for your efforts on our behalf and on the behalf of all of the people who benefited by your willingness to come down and do the work. You were not here, obviously, to shoot pictures for us. You were there to do serious and important work, and we appreciate your efforts in both regards. Thanks for coming in this afternoon. Get some rest. Thank you.
Thanks.
To Atlanta, and Bill Hemmer and Joey Jen.
Aaron, thank you. And with deference to our colleagues, Lou Waters and Natalie Allen, throughout this entire event, we'll be changing our crews here at the CNN Center in Atlanta. Also at this hour, more than 30 hours after the first plane crashed into the World Trade Center, New York's Mayor Rudy Giuliani now speaking again with reporters in Manhattan. Clearly, we're having difficulties thus far, Joey, but we're hoping to establish that audio shortly from New York City.
I want to move on, just try to bring you up to date on all the coverage that we've been getting and putting things together. We have John King standing by for us at the White House now. Late update on information he's getting there. John.
Well, Joey, good afternoon to you. Some extraordinary new information as the investigation continues and as we ask more and more questions. The White House now going on the record saying publicly from the press secretary's office that one of the reasons the president did not come directly back to Washington yesterday, remember the president was in Sarasota, Florida when the two planes hit the World Trade Center and the third plane hit the Pentagon. The White House now saying one of the reasons the president did not come directly back was, quote, because there was reasonable and credible information that the White House and Air Force One were targets. Air Force One, obviously, the president's plane was with him in Florida at the time. Now, what the White House is saying is, number one, that the plane that struck the Pentagon may have initially been targeting the White House and at the last minute decided to veer off and hit the Pentagon, which is only a few miles away instead. We tried to get more direct information as to why the White House is saying now that they considered Air Force One to be a potential target, because this is an area we explored throughout the day yesterday. Remember, the president started at an education event in Sarasota, Florida. We heard about these initial attacks, went on to a military base in Louisiana. Then when we thought he might be coming back to Washington, he went on to another military base, this one in Nebraska, ultimately returning to Washington last night with this extraordinary military escort. You see the wing of Air Force One, a 747 there, with a fighter jet off the wing. Other fighter jets also visible to those traveling on board Air Force One on that final leg yesterday. But at this time, when you're seeing these pictures yesterday evening, we had already been told that there were no more planes flying over the United States except for authorized military planes and other flights authorized by the United States government. So we have been yet to get an answer as to just how Air Force One was considered to be a target, or whether the White House believes that there was an effort by these hijackers to actually try to ram one of these planes into Air Force One, for example. We're not getting answers to those questions just yet, but the White House saying it had, quote, reasonable and credible information that the White House and Air Force One were targets. Now, the White House making this statement amid some questioning, second-guessing, you might say grumbling in Washington among conservatives and others who believe that the president should have made his way back to Washington sooner, that it was a very important political symbol for the president to be at the White House as all this unfolded. It is after a little criticism, and we should be careful and put this into context, overwhelming bipartisan support for the president at this moment, but there have been some questions raised about why it took so long to get him back to the White House. Ari Fleischer, the White House press secretary, and others in his office now saying on the record the reason was they believe this building and the president's plane were targets. Joey?
CNN senior White House correspondent John King joining us from the lawn of the White House. You know, the rescue efforts, of course, are still underway in New York.
Mayor Rudy Giuliani still briefing reporters there. We'll go back now. That audio connection now established.
Confidence in yourself and in the city. We'd also urge people not to in any way take any action on their own. We've had a few, not many, but we've had a few incidents that appear to have been directed against people because they may be regarded as Arab or Asian or Indian or whatever. The police department has a few reports like that. I emphasize not many, and there was only one situation of anybody trying to steal anything last night. So we haven't had looting, which we're going to certainly do everything we can to stop. But nobody should attack anyone else for racial, religious, ethnic reasons or any other reasons. That's what we're dealing with right now. We're dealing with the insane, sick hatred of people for another group of people because they fit into some kind of group mentality. It would be really horrible if New Yorkers practiced any form of that. So the police department will be in those parts of the city and give the ultimate protection that we can give to people who may be in that situation. One other thing, the generosity of people is really enormous. We have thousands of volunteers We have people volunteering to give blood. They're lined up on the street in front of Bellevue Hospital and all over the rest of the city. Also, some of our corporate citizens have already made major donations for the benefit of the families of the police officers, the firefighters, the EMS workers who will turn out to have lost their lives in this situation. GE, the CEO of GE, Jeff Imholt, told us that he is going to donate $10 million to a fund for the families of the police, fire, and other emergency workers that tragically turn out to have lost their lives in this situation. The Cisco Corporation has also offered a donation of $4 million for similar purposes, and we will organize a charitable organization that can be accountable and can make sure that all of this money gets in the hands that it's intended to get to, meaning to the children and the families that turn out to be the most direct victims of this tragedy. And again, I thank GE and I thank Cisco and all the others who have come forward in their own way and helped us. Governor?
Mayor, thank you. Let me join with you in thanking Governor DeFrancisco for being here and for the extraordinary help we've gotten from New Jersey and the cooperation we've had with the Port Authority. It's been just tremendous, and we appreciate that help. And the mayor referred to us as coming out of a one-hour briefing, but it's really not a briefing. It's a work session. And it's a work session where decisions are made and steps taken to try to alleviate the suffering and do everything we can for those who might still be alive. And I want to commend the mayor for his leadership and for the leadership of his team in these meetings, because it is extraordinary how well everyone works together and how serious everyone is in putting one agenda first and foremost and exclusively, and that is the interest of the people of New York State. So, Mayor, to you and your team, you deserve enormous credit for that leadership. It's not just the leadership, it's also the individual heroes who are out there. And just this afternoon, I was at Bellevue visiting a fallen firefighter who had been hospitalized, and I went up and congratulated him, and he got this smile on his face. And he looked at me, and it was like a line out of a movie. And he said in this thick accent, "What'd you expect? I'm a New Yorker." That's the spirit that is allowing us to get through this tragedy. And it's also the heart, because right after that, he got tears in his eyes and talked about his partner in the fire department who was missing, who had 10 kids. And I told him we would stand with him, we would stand with his partner, the city, the state, the country, to make sure that their heroism was recognized and protected. We have to, in honor of them, get back to business, make sure the states and city and country runs and that people go about their lives. And to that end, tomorrow afternoon, we are going to be holding a special extraordinary joint session of the state legislature and the state capitol, where we'll be having remarks and a memorial for those who, a moment of silence for those who have lost their lives. And the legislature will be passing a bipartisan legislation condemning this terrorist act and commending the tremendous heroism of those who have responded as they have. And I want to thank Senate Majority Leader Joe Bruno and Speaker Shelley Silver for coming together in a bipartisan way to send this strong message to the people of New York and to those terrorists that we're not going to be stopped. Also, to help get back to business as usual, beginning tomorrow, our Empire State Development Corporation will be making available on the 32nd floor of our office at 633 3rd Avenue all state agencies and authorities in one place, where companies, businesses, industries that need emergency economic assistance can come and find out what assistance is available so that we can look to provide, whether it's office space or help with power or lighting, that type of support. This is an incident that was going to remain in our minds throughout our lives. But it's an incident that we can overcome, put behind us, and move forward in protecting our freedom and the future of our city, state, and country. We are going to do that. Mayor, again, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Governor?
If I could, there are a couple of reasons why
Thank you very much.
I was able why I wanted to be here was, first of all, to tell the both of you that you've exercised great leadership during this very difficult time. I express my sorrow for the many, many people that we've lost, but also our support. Really, we're here to tell you that we support you in any way possible. We don't want to be in your way, but we want to bring support ranging from the state police to the National Guard or to the volunteers and many thousands of people that want to do something to help New Yorkers who have done just a fabulous job. Your city and state workers, your fire department, your police personnel, your emergency management people, your emergency medical services people have all, based on what we've seen, done an outstanding job. We were prepared to handle many, many people who were injured, and we still are. But the New York people have just done a fabulous job in dealing with that issue, and I congratulate everybody, but I do express my tremendous sympathies on behalf of the state to all of you for the losses you've incurred. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, thank you so much for your help and
Thank you,
support.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Governor. I just want to say on behalf of all of the council members and the